Hello and welcome to the Summer Sustainability Summit brought to you by One Click LCA. I'm Abigail Mella, I'm your host. This is a 2-day free live stream event for architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, and sustainability pros working across the construction value chain. We're delighted to have you here to get inspired, get engaged, and get sustainable. This keynote panel discussion, Targeting Net Zero in Construction, brings together some of the world's foremost sustainability leaders, including Panu Pasanen, the CEO and founder of One Click LCA, Christina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council, as well as Ron Locklin, who leads platform sustainability strategy at Autodesk. At the end of today's session, they will be taking questions directly from you, the audience. So please start dropping your questions in the comments section now. As a quick note, the summit is brought to you by One Click LCA, the global sustainability software empowering the construction value chain to decarbonize and get sustainable. You can learn more about us at oneclicklca.com or at the link in the comments. Now let's move on to our guests. As the CEO of the World Green Building Council, Christina Gamboa leads the world's largest and most influential local, regional, and global action network, spearheading the sustainable transformation of decarbonized and resilient built environments for everyone, everywhere. Learn more about World Green Building Council at the link in comments or visit worldgbc.org. Christina, happy to have you here. It's a great honor.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here today.
Next up, we're very pleased to be joined by Ron Locklin, who runs platform sustainability strategy at Autodesk. Autodesk technology spans architecture, engineering, construction, product design, manufacturing, and more, and their software empowers innovators to design and make a better world for all. You can learn more about Autodesk at the link in comments or visit autodesk.com. Ron, thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very nice. And finally, Panu Pasanen, CEO and founder of One Click LCA. He is a dedicated advocate for decarbonizing the built environment and specializes in life cycle assessment, embodied carbon, and life cycle costing for global green building systems. He also collaborates with government bodies and large corporations to draft impactful regulations and policies. Panu, thank you for being with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Very nice. All right, let's get started with the show. So, Christina, maybe you first. Just tell our audience here today about the World Green Building Council and also your work at World Green Building Council as the CEO.
Thank you so much again for the opportunity. So at World Green Building Council, I've been working now here for over 5 years. And we are a global NGO that was created over 2 decades ago by visionaries, knowing that the built environment can be a huge problem solver for many of our most important, let's say, challenges to tackle as societies. So we believe we're leading the built environment transformation so all people in our planet can thrive. And we're committed, as well as all the partners here in the call, around decarbonization, regeneration of nature and resources, and the creation of equitable and resilient communities. We represent 46,000 companies collectively, and they have a huge turnover. And so we have the opportunity with the 80 green building councils that we have in all sorts of geographies to make sure that we create that global momentum that is vitally needed for a healthy planet and a better future for all.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Christina. And Ron, you're up next.
Yeah, so
I'd love to learn about Autodesk and also your work running platform sustainability strategy.
sure. So you encapsulated really well who Autodesk is, but we are a leader in make and design. We're best known for AutoCAD. Everybody knows that. Some people don't make the connection, unfortunately, between AutoCAD and Autodesk. But we're the world leader in building design and a key player in manufacturing, both design and make, as well as in media and entertainment. So I lead the platform effort for sustainability at Autodesk. I work for the chief sustainability officer in his organization. I've been here for 12 years, based in Boston. one of my emphases is building an ecosystem for sustainability partners, the Sustainability Tech Partner Program, we call it. A second emphasis is building proofs of concept focused largely on our APS, Autodesk APS platform, carbon calculators, carbon energy conversion modules, things like that. And I also work with our developer audience, both internal but also external. So they help us build the tools that are needed out there by our customers and partners.
Thank you, Ron. And finally, Panu, tell our audience today a bit more about One-Click LCA and what you're doing there as the CEO of One-Click LCA.
Yeah, sure. So One-Click LCA's mission is to power the makers of a zero carbon future. So if you're in the audience and you make things, well, using Autodesk tools or others, we are happy to help you with what we do. And what we do is sustainability software, carbon, biodiversity, circularity. We help you tackle these difficult sustainability challenges, both in very early phases of the design, in the specification phase, and for measuring as built that you actually get what you wanted, from your project. And our goal is to scale this to 1 million users, which is just about the right amount of people to deal with decarbonizing this industry across the Western world. So there's going to be still a bunch of people needed for the emerging markets, but we are not sure that all the markets are ready for tackling sustainability at the way we are addressing it in the more advanced economies today. And what I do is I try to lead the organization to achieve maximum impact and maximum scale because we don't have a lot of time to be able to still contribute in the most critical way for the climate mitigation.
So I guess kind of a theme unifying all of the speakers is just global reach. And it sounds like you're extending your work far and wide. I'd like to pose a first question to all of you. And that first question is, why do companies target net zero? And Christina, I'd like to pass that to you first. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I will say that I believe World GBC has a big role on why companies are tackling this. We've been running several advocacy campaigns over the last few years, making sure that everyone hears that the built environment today is responsible for 37% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. We've campaigned this at the UN climate COPs, at global spaces, and now there's global recognition that built environment has also solutions to tackle those challenges. It is a key sector representing 13% of GDP, 9% over the world's employment. And so companies that are in this space to be competitive in a moment where this industry knows it can generate value without degrading resources and creating uncompetitive conditions, they're targeting net zero or decarbonizing because it will make their businesses future-proofed, more competitive, and of course will help societies have a better quality of life. So I believe that this can happen in every geography around the world because businesses understand that net zero is one of the biggest business opportunities because it makes them, again, be ready for climate change, which is already here. It is just a factor of adapting and making sure they can contribute to making, let's say, the construction industry, as I said, more competitive and embrace ways of using resources more efficiently, including energy, reducing carbon, resources, embracing circularity, and of course, making sure that those business models are fit for purpose in what companies are, let's say, also inquiring about what is an investable company, what is a company worthwhile of investing, and those that are targeting zero are being more competitive and attracting better funding.
Great. So if I may add that I think the differentiation point here is critical because there's a fair share of construction market which is behaving kind of on a commoditized way. Like it's quite difficult to get strong differentiation in much of the market. And of course, if you cannot differentiate, then you have an economic problem at some point. Sustainability, however, is a differentiator on which you never run out of. you can push it really, really, really far. And being always just ahead of the market is a very valuable differentiator and has helped many companies become leaders in a much bigger way than they have been, let's say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago when they started this transformation towards sustainability. So this is like a strategic investment, basically, in differentiating and winning market share. If you are established player, keeping that market share, obviously. And secondly, from the point of view of risk, I mean, you can attract capital as a company, obviously, at better terms, potentially, if you have credentials to show for this, but also just in terms of your assets. So if you invest in projects, if you invest in businesses which are not compatible with net zero, you have a pretty significant risk of having to write down your investments. And that kind of risk, I mean, it's not like easy thing to do if you're in the board of directors of listed company or otherwise company, which is having to consider these things in a more serious manner. So I think this kind of financial risks that are directly affecting a business, how am I going to be taxed if I invest in this asset which is not compatible with net zero in 5 years? Nobody can answer these questions, like without foresight of who's in the power in 5 years in your country. But having to go through this thinking motion, make sure that you're actually pricing the risk.
Just to add to that, at a highest level, and you referred to this, Panu, there's financial reasons. For an American public company, Wall Street demands it, shareholders demand we move towards net zero. But at a much more basic level, it's the right thing to do. And in particular, the workforce increasingly demands it. Millennials in particular see this as really critical. It's a differentiator for a company to drive to this. And a lot of employees, great employees, won't tolerate working for a company that doesn't care about this. So it is interesting. Everything you both said I totally agree, but a lot of it does boil down to the workforce and where we're headed with a workforce who's willing to participate and wants to help you with that as a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe there's something else to add. There's something also called the ambition loop. And it's also this notion where as policy change is announced or happening, then there's like two sorts of drivers. Companies also anticipating that regulatory change, or companies being reactive and being like falling back on what's going on. And we're seeing around the world policy change stepping up in mandating disclosure on life cycle assessments in some geographies, disclosure on embodied carbon, mandating performance of operational carbon, mandating that more circular, let's say, goals, even from waste to landfill, that is being regulated. There's so many things going around. So national policies and conversations with city leaders, climate action plans, and that regulatory change is really shaping up also the landscape because the first movers are ready for that regulation. But then the next ones are seeing that is happening. And over 80%, 90% of the world has a net zero goal by commitment to the UN. That's why I was mentioning the UN climate summits and goals. And so actually, as that gets regulated and off the ground to deliver on that, then that also changed that cycle of the leadership in decarbonizing, brings bolder and stronger regulation, greater advancement in the industry, and then again, greater change in an enabling policy environment. So this is unstoppable. It is happening, and it is the change that is enacted by that interplay of different actors.
Just to add a really quick point, you point out that it varies by region, and you're absolutely right. The Nordics tend to be ahead in terms of regulations. Europe is ahead of the US and Canada in general. It's also uneven by industry. So in the building design, architectural space, construction space, it's ahead. In manufacturing, the regulations are lagging, but they'll get there. And we see that in spades in our company because of who we target as industries. It's pretty interesting. So things are moving at uneven speeds, but they're moving.
Yeah, maybe to add,
Yeah.
the final, thank you. the final one would be, well, I didn't say in the introduction, I'm from Colombia and proudly understand developing markets. And from World GBC, we want equity in this transition and that everyone can access the decarbonization pathways because it is beneficial to be resilient. Today, 80% of the world is vulnerable already for climate change. So decarbonization mitigation is a response to being more resilient. And we're seeing from our GBC networks, the Africa network, the Latin American network, Asia Pacific in a different degree, that's more in some countries that's very diverse, but there's some more advanced economies. They want to promote decarbonization now, leapfrogging and avoiding being at par with the energy transition because it makes sense from a clean energy way of thinking of what is good development for a region and a country. So it's really interesting that we are surrounded by progressive individuals that want to do this of course, contextualized, but it's not limited to developed countries. There is momentum in different geographies.
Thank you. So I think we've quite satisfactorily explored why companies are targeting net zero. And I'd like to transition to understand how companies can implement net zero in practice. And maybe Ron, I'll pass that question to you first, if that's okay.
Sure. So there's a lot of ways companies can do this. So one is, they can run a very efficient, capable shop themselves and minimize their carbon footprint, minimize travel, etc. We're always cited Autodesk as one of the best companies for this, but that's not what really counts. What counts is we provide tools to industries like construction that are notoriously high carbon footprint, as Christina pointed out, and that's where the real leverage comes. If customers use our tools and other tools, there are many out there, to help minimize their impact, that's the way to really get towards net zero. And just as an example, we have Revit, which is the leading building design tool. If you use Revit to do building design and couple it with our Insight tool, you get a very robust energy calc engine, strong embodied carbon database, customizable dashboards that can help you with your planning to drive to that goal. The tools exist today. And we have lots of examples of that, but I won't do any more for the moment. But it's a very achievable goal with tools that exist right now.
Yeah. If I may continue on that, so how to go about this in practice is that you need to incorporate it in your key business processes. That's kind of the only way. So when you sell anything, you need to sell it based on the value of the net zero. Like not every customer necessarily underwrites every project with that. But if you start selling them that, you will be able to get to a better outcome, most likely, financially for both parties, but also definitely from the point of view of sustainability outcomes for the project in question. So you need to incorporate it in the way how you position your offering, how you sell it. That's number one. The number two, if you're on the demand side or anywhere in the demand chain, you need to set targets. So you need to tell everybody, look, I want you to change this, the carbon intensity of our work together with you to get to net zero. And I want to know what you're going to do and how you're going to quantify it and how you're going to be held accountable for achieving that. So you need to bring people on board, and you actually also need to change the suppliers or partners you work with if they don't, because otherwise it loses credibility. And once you set the targets, then you need to make sure that you explore options. And the most economic option is always to explore dematerialization. So if you can reduce material demand, it's almost always saving you everything possible. So it's saving you, waste, obviously, it's saving you money, it's saving you carbon. And obviously, you don't need to account for circularity of materials you never consumed, like pretty obvious. So I think those are the things to start with. And the last is accounting and accountability, so that you actually, make sure that you quantify the performance and you hold people accountable for achieving the performance. So, obviously, simpler in practice and simpler in words than in practice. But so there's a lot of tools. We do, of course, provide one-click LCA, But for the part of the industry who's only involved in specifying materials or considering materials, we just launched a tool called Materials Compass, which helps you actually to navigate the whole breadth of materials that are available and identify the sustainable options quickly, because you need to understand if I can find something better right now because I need to make a specification, and that kind of things, they are really important that you incorporate it in your core business process.
Yeah, maybe to add to that in a different vision, because I'm very lucky to be in a call with two practitioners with two practical tool sets and things like that. And I'm an advocate, I'm an economist by training. And I speak with global businesses and companies around the world to how to inspire action. And I would say one of the key things here into how to implement net zero in practice also is get inspired by examples. And at World GBC, we have a net zero carbon buildings commitment we launched in 2017 when net zero was not a word in reaction to the Paris Agreement. And there in our database, in our website, you can see we have almost 200 signatories and some leading companies showing how they've committed to be front runners in decarbonizing by 2030. And then you can see like practical examples of how they're coming up together with solutions. There's case studies of those buildings. And then when you go to your business, you can get inspired on how to make that journey matter. And at any rate, another source of inspiration is the literature that clearly spells out the pathway for net zero that is documented by the International Energy Agency. And we know that on average, let's say better buildings that are on this journey have to achieve deep goals of, let's say, reducing energy intensity, as Panu was saying, reducing operational emissions drastically, making sure they're tackling the embodied carbon. Circularity is a huge enabler of that journey. And if I was talking about policy, and I'll wrap this practical guidance by saying all new buildings will have to be net zero emission buildings by 2030 in Europe by regulation. So there will be coming definitions of what that zero emission buildings is in Europe, and that's going to be a discussion nationally. And we're working with our green building councils and making sure our roadmaps for companies and for that policy leadership make sense to unlock the opportunity.
If I could, go ahead, Panu. Sorry.
What
Let
I
me
did-
just a really quick comment. So you mentioned, Panu, work this into your processes as a customer. Absolutely. The other thing to add is start early. So start early with design where the biggest impact is. If you do that, you have a much better chance of minimizing carbon footprint. So we have the Forma tool that's all about early stage design for building and site design. Start with that and then move on towards more detailed tools like Revit and Insight, etc. But that can give you an enormously bigger impact. So sorry to step on you there, Panu. Apologies.
No, absolutely. Last thing maybe to add here is awareness. So not everybody knows about how to go about this in practice. There's really a lot of free education available. We provide some of it, others provide other sources of education. Just get your people trained. I mean, because you cannot expect them to manage things that they are not understanding or being able to communicate about effectively.
So we took a very deep dive into carbon, and this might be somewhat of a contrarian question, but I want to ask you, why is carbon not enough? And I'd also like you to explore so-called carbon tunnel vision, and what that means in the market today. And maybe Panu, I'll let you tackle this first.
So, carbon is an environmental pressure, but there are other environmental pressures like lack of ecosystems, lack of resources, and similar things, right? And carbon tunnel vision doesn't capture the full harm done to the livability of the planet ultimately. And one thing it just doesn't do at all, it doesn't do resilience, because like it or not, it's getting hotter. Like not just because summer is coming in northern hemisphere. And actually, when you invest in real assets, you want them to be survivable. Like you want them to be places where people can live, thrive in, and where they can enjoy. And if you're running a business, you want your customers to feel okay coming there and enjoying there. And like the resilience is critical. To that end, we have quite recently partnered with world's leading microclimate simulation software company called Envimet to be able to create resilient built environments. So I think I would start by looking at mitigating carbon and building resilience. That's the core. And then on the deepening and broadening the sustainability spectrum, going with biodiversity and circularity, which tackle other sustainability concerns, would be the next two most important, because they are the ones which allow us to preserve actually natural environment and ecosystems.
I can jump in next unless you want to go, Christina. You're okay if I
Oh,
jump in?
go ahead, run. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have a similar viewpoint, not to get too much tunnel vision and carbon at Autodesk. So we know that energy and materials are first and foremost and on everybody's mind. We talk about carbon constantly, but there are two other kind of stages we see coming. One is health and resilience, which Panu just referred to. And really, it's all about making products and places safer, healthier, more resilient, healthy building materials, etc. And resilience in the sense that Panu just referred to. The other I've already hinted at, which is work and prosperity, a little bit further out there, but this is helping acquire in-demand skills and lifelong learning to meet the needs of evolving industries. And this is, again, this is what a lot of the workforce cares about. Even if they don't know about it, we want to help them prepare for that. So we see these kind of stages that we have to work with, and it's way beyond carbon.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, I was going to take it a little bit bigger picture. That's why I thought you guys, I would follow up in terms of saying there's very interesting studies saying that right now we are overshooting 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries, and urbanization is responsible for a quarter of that loss. So when we talk about decarbonization, I think the next word to pair with is restoration or regeneration of nature. There has to be some sort of balance. We have to stop the extraction, the extractive way this sector is operating, and making sure that if there's going to be that resource consumption, it is done without harming more nature, and that we help nature thrive. It cannot be nature or us. We have to thrive with nature. And so that is a topic that is coming really front and center in the built environment, because we have a huge impact in how we extract materials, where we put the landfill and everything. Is really devastating. And we do have to leapfrog and help many countries that are going to be urbanizing at a very high rate make better choices and not build in biodiversity hotspots, not lose more, and try to bounce back. And going to the health angle, I mentioned that right now, while climate change is here, the global warming is affecting already people. And today, at least, 50% of the population are at risk from those climate change impacts. I mentioned higher percentage because there's a little bit of debate now, but let's say it's 50. Half of the world is already impacted. That means the resiliency angle will kick in. And to improve our conditions in that uncertainty, we can definitely act on the indoor environmental quality of buildings. And that's super important, because right now we've come to a point in the degradation that the statistic is that 92% of the world breathes polluted air. So we have trashed our livelihoods in a way where we need in the buildings to make them safer. And that means making sure the indoor environmental air quality, that the building materials are safe, and that people's well-being, especially against climate change, is addressed, because that's going to be the imperative. So those topics of making sure that we don't lose the solidarity angle, the environmental quality of buildings, and how they can improve our livelihoods, it's quite important.
Great, thanks. So I would maybe jump on the biodiversity thing here. So we have in Europe now 2 countries which have released regulations on biodiversity for construction, and France has a zero artificialism net, so no new artificial areas, so built up areas, not effectively enforced today, but still in principle important. So it's trying to preserve on a net state, like the available unbuilt land. And England has gone further. So England has regulated biodiversity net gain regulation, which says that you actually have to improve biodiversity either on the site or off-site by 10%. And that's an important step, but it doesn't capture supply chain. So when we started working on the biodiversity topic about 2 years ago, we actually went 2 different tracks. So we work on one hand on the site. So how can you preserve and enhance biodiversity on the site where you build? But the second, how do you make sure that your supply chain doesn't, log rainforests and other nice stuff? So you need to keep both ends of the value chain in mind and try to think through what's the overall optimal. But these things go a bit hand in hand. So more you can renovate, more circular you can go. There's a very strong correlation between decarbonization, biodiversity, and circularity in many cases.
Yeah, and possibly I'll speak on behalf of water and water and people. Today, around the world, 25% of the world's population doesn't have access to safe, potable water. So this is also goes because of the degradation and the pollution of our lineal systems and not cleaning up what we use. So the management of water in buildings can help a lot, from gray water harvesting, not using potable water in the sanitary, for toilets. That is embedded in deep sustainability principles. So as Ron was saying, in the design phase, when you want to see what you want to achieve from the building and how can you improve the livelihood of people, improve their wellness, their well-being, you can address and you can innovate. And with an integrative design approach, which is a key principle that possibly we haven't mentioned today, and we have to pay our respects to integrative design, you can actually, and there's excellent books on that, you can actually bring all design teams to one table, and before you start with your budget, innovate to get your building to be really high performing. And now with the energy, and you can balance out the energy imperative with the water, with bringing in nature, making people sure that the indoor environmental quality is safe. And it kind of feels that we've forgotten pandemics, but it is that the healthy buildings angle is quite popular in many geographies. So it's also a matter of making sure that holistically we have that sustainability response. And of course, carbon is what's pressing because we're missing the goals that we want to achieve. We're being on target, but most of the sectors of the world are not on target. But this sector can get back on track if we collaborate and we can, as you guys said, educate and use tools that help us leapfrog to get there.
All right. I would like to move on to our final prompt. And I would just like to note for everyone in the audience, we have a live question and answer session coming up. So you can directly ask questions to Christina, Ron, and Panu. Please drop your comments or your questions in the comments section. And to kind of conclude this portion of the program, I would now like to ask, what are the sustainability priorities in construction? And Ron, can I pass that to you first and you can take that first?
Sure.
Thank you.
So as with my other answers, I'll start at a really kind of practical level. There's so much opportunity in construction. It's kind of where to start. It's an extremely dirty industry. Christina cited that I think her numbers were 37% of the carbon, both operational and embodied, is in that industry. I think I've seen numbers even higher than that. Trying to attack that is a huge opportunity. And interestingly, the 2 dirtiest materials out there, the ones that have the biggest impact if you can help solve carbon footprint, are concrete and asphalt, which make an enormous component of the construction industry and of the built environment. So we're working with partners to help with that, to minimize that. Our own tools are focusing on that. So that's one area. How do we minimize carbon footprint with the dirtiest materials? Another is reducing waste. Construction is arguably the dirtiest industry in terms of waste. And how can you build into the tools out there much more efficient build so that you don't have as much waste? And that's an enormous opportunity. The third area is a little bit more advanced, but Panu has referred to it multiple times, as has Christina, is circularity. How do we basically reuse materials? How do we plan for that? It's more than just waste. It's also about minimizing your footprint just by being more efficient with materials. That is coming along. That's super interesting area, much more complex than it sounds at a high level. But for me, those are the priorities.
If I continue on and complete what Ron just said, so I completely agree with concrete. And why is concrete a bit of tricky industry is because it's capital intensive and it's a pure commodity. Cement is capital intensive and used the main material to make concrete. And when you have a commoditized industry, differentiation is hard. So the market actually has to be excluding high carbon supply. That's the way, the mechanics we need. And to that end, we, because this is a tricky problem to solve, to that end, we have just recently launched concrete carbon tools and concrete EPD generators, which allow you to pass data back directly to the people who are buying the concrete from you or specifying concrete from you as a manufacturer. So you don't have to go through all these chains of getting your data published, which can be very costly. So tackling concrete is very important. But I would say still the most important thing, what Ron already said earlier, is starting super early. So starting with target setting, starting with optioneering, because it's not like you always have to do a project one way, right? You actually could consider buying an existing building and refurbing it or extending it. Or you could consider maybe a different shape, or you could consider modular buildings sometimes. For example, if you extend a building, you wouldn't necessarily need to always build a permanent building. You could do a modular extension because that has way better reuse possibilities should the needs ever change. So thinking about these things very early, and reuse of materials is maybe not super sexy, and it's kind of labor intensive as well because it requires people to work on salvaging things and capturing things, but going to very practical design, like connection design your materials and your connections so that you can actually reuse what you put in there. And obviously that's not very easy for ready-mix concrete, but for most other materials, there are standard solutions that you can apply, and you can have 5, 7, maybe 10 lifetimes for a certain material if you just design it right, do the right connections, and reuse it correctly.
And Christina, any final thoughts from you?
Thank you. I was thinking, hearing you speak, that also the other, let's say the high priorities are making sure that the facility manager, the operators of buildings, understand the sort of asset that Panu and Ron has described as very high energy efficient, very high performing, healthy for people, bringing in, let's say, nature-based solutions and all of this. Because if we don't have those entities being able to manage those at a very proficient level, we will miss the opportunity. Because from the ESG perspective, right, these entities most likely will also be investing in renewable energy, thinking on how to compensate for emissions, and thinking about carbon removal activities, which is a huge area for innovation in the sector that is picking up. And there's also an area quite interesting, and it's the grid responsive buildings. So it's not only thinking about buildings alone in a system, in a systemic thinking, it's integrated with the energy transition, the building transition and the energy transition. And that means that if buildings are also performing and being, let's say, this scenario where they are very high performance in terms of all the things we put on them to do, then you get actually the opportunity to help further the goals of decarbonizing the grid by being responsive to the needs of the different times where the grid can be dirtier or cleaner. And then actually you get a model where you can also capitalize from your business the renewable energy you can procure and do a holistic intervention by bringing the systemic opportunities. And that, of course, goes to whole life cycle emissions thinking. That is what is also being proposed here, how you mesh also not only one phase, but you're thinking of all the whole life cycle impacts. And then that's where circularity and also other solutions make sense. I think that's what I wanted to say, because I see it as an upcoming, and of course, not leaving aside the equity side. The world is so big and large, there are so many challenges. And I just wanted to also mention that there are 2.8 billion people today in energy poverty. So energy access and electrifying buildings is very important. And also a billion people are in informal settlements. And if we don't change the dynamics holistically around the world, it will be 2 billion by 2050. So also helping with low tech solutions, affordable housing solutions is going to be critical for the overall balance of the sector to contribute meaningfully to decarbonizing and creating, a better outcome for all our families, our kids, and our societies.
Those are wonderful final words, Christina. Thank you. We're going to move now to our top 3 takeaways section. So before we convened for the show, we aligned on 3 takeaways, and I would love for Panu to kick this off, followed by Ron, followed by Christina, and then we will very quickly zoom into the live question and answer segment of the show. Panu, over to you.
Net zero is a huge opportunity. In simple terms, nobody wants to buy your product, nobody wants to fund your business, and nobody wants to work for you if you're not credible on your carbon credentials. Simple as that. There are 2 huge opportunities that we have presently. One of them is a long-term one, that's net zero. The other one is AI. It's going to be there for long term, but the investing time horizon, probably where it's economically having the best yields, is within the next 5 years. This is the long-term one. Anything you build based on net zero is going to be there and helping your business in the decades to come.
Great. Shall I just jump in, Abigail, for the next?
Yeah.
Take it away, Ron.
So leveraging existing solutions to decarbonize is another top takeaway. There are things out there today you can use. Many tools are out there. One Click LCA has a suite of solutions, as do we. There's many third-party tools. There's even tools from our competitors, some of whom are at this event. I gave an example of Insight with Revit, where you do design and you use the analytical add-ons to be able to inform your decision making. Another key point, though, too, is to start early with design. This has come up multiple times. One example is using the Forma tool we have to do early stage design, so you can plan things out way early in order to decarbonize. Much more efficient that way.
All right, so the third one, advanced efficiency, health, and equity. Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. These decarbonized and efficient buildings are and will be as sexy as electric vehicles. There's no dissimilarity in what they can achieve. And it means efficiency in tackling the inefficient use of energy to make sure that you are prioritizing that sort of performance, prioritizing reducing the 40% of raw materials that this industry extracts worldwide, making sure you procure the right materials you need, making sure that you're using the right disclosure that they have to specify them. Efficiency and circularity, because 7% of the world today is only circular. That's not going to help us get to any place. So efficiency, 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 and health and equity, of course, because as climate change is here and the state of the world demands that we also act in solidarity, make sure that what you do contributes to improve people's livelihoods. Here it's about livability. It's we can be individualistic. It's around our health, protecting our health, all what we talked about, but it is very important to advance equity, because the balance of, let's say, of how we can live in communities will involve that we raise all boats and that everyone gets a shot at a good life, and the built environment has a huge role to contribute to that. So that's, I guess, the third one.
Thank you so much, all of you. Before we get going with our live question and answer session with Christina, Ron, and Panu, I would like to announce the beta launch of One-Click LCA's new materials compass. All of us in the company are so excited about this. With it, you can find and compare construction and renovation materials from the largest building materials database in the world to help you cut carbon and also satisfy sustainability commitments for your projects. You can learn more about Materials Compass by visiting the link in the comments. So check out the link in the comments. And if you're interested in discussing Materials Compass or getting a free consultation from One-Click LCA's sustainable construction experts, you can have the opportunity to book a demo with our team of experts now. You'll see a live poll popping up, and a One-Click LCA business team member will contact you to book a custom demo and get advice about decarbonizing your projects if you click yes in the poll. So go ahead and click yes, and we'll contact you to set up a call. Thank you very much. And we are going to get started with our live Q&A segment. And this is going to be a lightning round. We're going to answer these fast and furious. So the first question coming up is from Harish. What is the possibility of integrating timber and other nature-based wood materials in the realm of future MMC? How do we realize its full potential? Just raise your hand and take it, whoever feels best equipped to answer. No takers. May I pass this to you, Panu?
So I believe this relates to modular construction, this abbreviation in this context. So timber has some limitations in modular construction as opposed to steel, which is much better at taking heat and unfavorable conditions. But we have seen timber-based solutions in modular construction work well, but they are typically limited to certain use cases and conditions. So because they cannot take all the stresses that you can with metal-based.
Next question. Let's go at a fast clip here. Let's see. LEED offers RECs, renewable energy certificates, that can be traded as offsets to achieve net zero. Isn't this a bit like greenwashing? How is this benefit transferred if once the building is sold? Thank you, Eilert, for your question. Please take it, whomever feels most comfortable answering.
Well, I can take this. So construction projects typically have to buy, or most construction projects are not grid deconnected. So they depend on the grid, and it's very difficult to get a structural energy supplier. I mean, you cannot build on the site everything you need. So you need a market-based solution, and yeah, the RECs, they do have their downsides, but also you need to be working with things that exist on the market. So not every market is very mature with this. And I would say that you can question the long-term value of RECs, but it's a thing that you can do, and nobody can really provide you a 25-year electricity contract if you don't actually invest in ownership of energy-producing assets, which is really the only way you can do that.
Any other thoughts? Okay, we're moving on. Okay. Do you think targeting net zero might negatively affect globalization, such as by requiring the avoidance of purchasing materials from long distances? Who would like to take this? Ron, please.
I can start with this. So just a pure opinion, but there's no indication yet that targeting net zero has affected global supply chains. I mean, there's many things that impact global supply chains, but I haven't seen data that shows targeting net zero is one of those. Typically, economics will drive, how the supply chain works and where things are sourced. And as there are more regulations around how you need to build and how to be most efficient, I think that's going to be more of a factor than just net zero, meaning you're not going to, import things from halfway around the globe. I think there are other factors that'll take precedent. But I haven't seen data that shows this yet. I don't know if Christina and
No, I agree. No, there's no data on that. I mean, I would disagree also with that it's not negatively affecting globalization or economic opportunity. On the contrary, actually, if you have more of a conscious mindset and you want to promote local economies, you want to promote cleaner provision of economies, why would you be flying or moving materials all over the world for it? I mean, it kind of, there is a missed opportunity there to rethink what prosperity is. So I think this goes also in a shift of mindset of what is actually, isn't it more interesting and more beneficial to actually know what goes into your building with some serious environmental product declarations attached to the materials, and also knowing the carbon footprint of how long it has to travel? That sort of transparency actually allows us to be better choices. And are we asking those things that we're shipping away to be modular? How are we going to deconstruct, promote circularity? That can be done locally. Locally, the circular solutions, you have to build the infrastructure in cities, the warehouses for that to happen, and that helps decarbonization. So I would say we have to be more creative and allow space for all sorts of solutions, because the sort of just lineal consumption from faraway distances I use and then I dispose, it's not getting us really closer to any of the global goals.
Thank you. Next question coming up from Earl. How can startups and SMEs in emerging markets use Autodesk and similar platforms to minimize carbon footprint in design and construction with limited financial resources? Ron, pass that to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have the Autodesk Foundation, which is a separate company from Autodesk, but works with startups and SMEs in emerging markets to use our tools to do exactly this. This and other goals too. But we are very much focused on helping smaller companies without resources to invest heavily, both in people skills, in advanced engineering skill sets, as well as tools. We can help do this. So this is a major goal of us as a company through our foundation, and I'd love to provide more input to Earl and others who are interested in this.
If I maybe piggyback on that one, so on one-click LCAs, we have, of course, similar things, no foundations or such, but we do have a one-click LCA planetary, which is freely available everywhere for anybody in the world as a carbon accounting tool, specifically thought for global south, where you may have more of these limitations. And secondly, we also have a one-click LCA Academy, where we train everybody in the world for free, and I think 5 or 6 languages today, and we are adding more, with the whole point of removing every barrier that can be removed.
And we also do have an educational investment too, very significant, where our software is free to educators and professors. So good point, Panu. I'll piggyback on that.
Christina, maybe any final words from you?
Thank you. I've learned so much because I also, let's say, thrive in diversity of perspective. So just having the exchange with Panu and Ron has been so enriching. I mean, I'm very grateful. And I think from the questions we got, the audience was engaged and being curious. So I think our contributions are positive if we get a glimpse of these professionals acting on climate and making their projects really outstanding and making good strides in being excellent professionals that are driving forward this agenda.
Thank you. I would like to quickly let you know about, which Panu just referenced, actually, the one-click LCA training programs that are delivered free as part of our commitment to train 1 million professionals by the year 2035 to power the makers of a zero-carbon future. You can access hundreds of hours of on-demand course material at our One-Click LCA Academy, or you can attend a live week-long boot camp for comprehensive training on life cycle assessment, environmental product declaration, and more. The trainings are provided by in-house experts. And if you scan the QR code here, you can enroll for our upcoming summer EPD boot camp or visit academy.oneclicklca.com. And please stay tuned for our next session coming up actually in just a few minutes, how AI, digital twins, and data accelerate sustainable infrastructure, featuring Rodrigo Fernandez of Bentley Systems with Johanna Järvinen from One Click LCA. Do stick around, and we look forward to seeing you there. Final note, we're always happy to hear from you. If you would like to contact One Click LCA, visit oneclicklca.com. You can join our rapidly growing LinkedIn community or check out our new YouTube channel with rich content about decarbonizing the industry and making construction more sustainable. And it's been an absolute honor and pleasure. Like personally, this was just incredible. I'm so pleased to have gotten the chance to learn more from all of you. And yeah, thank you very much. It's been a great delight and a great treat.
Thanks.